Hey, it's Jeremy, Jeremy.net. I am a comic book artist, writer, creator, and I share my creative process here with you on the internet. If you'd like to support this channel, get additional bonus live streams twice a month, be able to read all of my comic books free online, you can become a Patreon subscriber at patreon.com/Jeremy. It's patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can get access to all that and more. If you'd like to get a free digital sketchbook, the first 3 chapters of my comic book Morning Star in the rough sketch version with lettering added, so you can kind of read the comic book but see the creative process of how I built it, along with getting some work in progress animated GIFs, recommended reads, what I'm reading, what I'm watching, all delivered to your inbox once a month. You can sign up for my newsletter at newsletter.jeremy.net. And if you'd like to purchase physical copies of my comic books, or if you read digitally on Kindle or Comixology, you can go to amazon.jeremy.net. You can pick up books like my first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods. I'm the artist and writer. It's a psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control. You can pick that up, or you can pick up volume 1 of my comic book Morning Star, which is Lucifer's Fall from Heaven told as a Western. The series is an 8-issue series. This volume contains issues 1 through 4, plus tons of bonus features. And if you would like to pick up the final issue of Morning Star in print, you can pick that up at my main website, my main hub, jeremy.net. That, again, is also available on Comixology as well. And there are links to all of these in the description for the video. You can definitely check all of that out. So, hey, here we go. All right. Let's see. So, what I'm working on right now. So, a while back, a couple weeks ago, I was working on a bunch of thumbnails for some Medusa-themed pieces. And haven't had a chance to revisit them in the past 2 weeks. So I thought, all right, let me come back here and hop on and put these up now, or come back to them. So the idea was to try and, instead of thumbnailing a single piece and do all of the iterations of the One Piece, One Piece. I have still not watched One Piece yet, although it comes highly recommended. I just haven't had time to sit down and watch it yet. But my alternate thinking was to try and make a series at one time. So to try and do thumbnails for, say, 6. I don't know if I'm going to have more than 6. I may expand the series if I do. But to try and thumbnail out 6 different pieces at one time and kind of do all the thumbnailing at once. So the image that's on the left is the first in the series that's actually already done. I completed that piece, and I started on the second image that's here. So the rest of these are just me working through different variations and just seeing what else I come up with. So the idea is to come up with at least 6 solid compositions. And I really like the idea of one with the serpents coming to life out of the woman having snakes tattooed on her head. So that one I think is a strong contender. In fact, that one alone, I kind of want to do a deeper dive and draw a few iterations of that piece. So far I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, maybe one more composition that I want to do. But we shall see. So I don't have another idea off the top of my head that I want to do. So I think I'm just going to sketch a little bit of the tattoo one and see if any other compositions occur to me while I'm doing this. But the common theme that all of these pieces have had is drawing this theme of having the figure in mostly silhouette with light kind of raking across them. So having their face in shadow, mostly shadow, and then having light coming across their body while still having their eyes, the bit of light, almost like they're glowing. So it's a bit of a study in noir lighting as well as playing with composition. So it's a fun little challenge here. Yeah, I just said that I was going to mess around with doing some more compositions of the tattoo one, but I find this highly interesting, coming in here and actually starting to dig into the lighting side of this composition. But why not dabble in that a little bit and see where it takes me? And I think the question on this one is what I'm going to do with the shadow side in terms of the figure when it's in silhouette, because in my original version, I had the silhouettes just disappearing into black. Whereas with this, I actually think it might lend itself to just being dark, but not necessarily going all the way to black. There we go. A little bit of framing visually here. It's funny. I just watched the season premiere of Archer, and framing made me think of phrasing. Framing. So maybe something like this, where instead of having it go all the way to black, the way I did in the first one, I'll leave a little bit of light in here. I'm curious how well this would read if I were to go full silhouette, like a Mike Mignola. Or maybe just leave only enough light for it to be somewhat recognizable what's going on. Just leave a little bit of light in some of the detail areas. Not detail areas, but just like places where I want a little bit of the anatomy to show through. For instance, like right here, this lower part of the figure, I can come in here and let most of this go almost all the way to black. Still leave a little bit of light in some areas, or a little bit of recognizable value in some areas, I guess, would really be more of what I'm trying to say. And it's funny because I still have not really trained my brain to think in terms of like just working completely on a gray surface and working towards highlights. Adding in highlights and adding in shadows kind of in equal measure. But working on this piece, it almost feels like tonally, it would, just in the way I've lit this, make more sense to start with a completely gray surface and then draw in highlights and shadows. And I just shortened this a little bit, but I realized what the composition actually needs is that this is going to be a horizontal piece, that I really do actually need just the opposite. I need more space on either side. Yeah, if this is going to be a horizontal composition, I need more space on either side. And what's funny is I'm trying to think, well, what do I want to fill this space up with if I'm going to have these? Horizontal extra space. What do I want to put in there? Just trying to figure out how to treat the rest of this area. And something that instantly occurred to me was, why not put more serpents in there? Maybe having a giant serpent kind of lurking in the background. That might be kind of cool. Bring the opacity up a little bit and the brush size down for a little bit of detail. Just checking some stuff here on the side. All right. Just a little bit darker. Now, right now, these serpents are a little bit well, they're very rough. But they certainly don't feel like either snakes or hair at the moment. So I kind of want to beef them up a little bit. And I do feel like a little bit divided in terms of working on this while live streaming, only in that I realize it might be more interesting for you guys to watch me thumbnail this a little bit more zoomed in so you can actually see the work that I'm doing and the detail that I'm doing. But by nature, when I thumbnail, I like to work small, specifically to limit how much detail I can put in. Because sometimes you can get lost in the detail and not really pay service to whether the composition as a whole is working. And I want the composition as a whole to work. Therefore, it makes more sense for me just in terms of my creative process, to work smaller. But the main thing I'm trying to get right now is just a little bit more interest in her hair. Just to have more going on with it. So it really doesn't feel like it's just a couple of tubes stuck to her head. I want to give it more mass, more volume, just more visual interest. And do I want to have some of these spilling over her? So I've got one that's creeping around the corner of her neck here. Let's see here. I don't want to erase that. I want to blur that. There we go. Oh, that's a little too big. Yeah, the problem with working transparently is that if I just erase it, then there's white underneath. But if I try to sample the color and repaint it, it's going to sample that gray when actually I'm just drawing with black at a low opacity. Which is the reason why, for a while, I switched to the process of painting with 100% opacity, but on a layer that was set to say 10 to 20%. So do I want to have a serpent curl around her this way? Now it's getting a little messy. Yeah, whatever's going on over here, yeah, this I'm just going to erase. Whatever's going on over here, it's not quite working for me. And I guess instead of drawing, I don't know, some sort of bracelet, it feels like it would make sense to have a serpent wrapped around her upper arm. But see, that's creating a weird tangent with her neck. So the challenge is how to position all these things in such a way that it does not create tangents, but also creates visual interest. What if I have a serpent sort of resting here? He's just kind of making his way down her shoulder. It's an idea. Yeah, I'm just trying stuff out here. See what works, what doesn't. Now that's an idea. I can just erase everything and then, whoops, too much blur to smudge tool. And then just smudge in the area around it. That kind of works. It's fine for a thumbnail. So I don't necessarily like having these two snakes in this head-on kind of confrontation. I mean, they're not in a confrontation, they're all part of her, but the fact that I've got one serpent kind of wrapping around the same arm, but coming from that, coming from the left side, yeah, I'm just not sure. There's something about this that I'm not 100% on. And I think instead of bashing my head against that piece, I am going to jump around now and maybe, let's see. See, Professor Diaz is in the chat. Hi, how you doing? Thanks for dropping by. I'm just thumbnailing out some pieces. I want to do a series of Medusa-themed images. And, I did one earlier in the summer. I had a few other compositions left over that I never got around to drawing, and now I'm just sort of flushing these out. Let's see here. So I'm going to come back to this one when I figure out what exactly I want to do with the number of serpents. Now this one over here, it's the third in the series. This one, I think, actually kind of works with the background really going dark and having the serpents in there just act as silhouette or just kind of implying detail as opposed to drawing the full serpent. And it seems like all of these have got the light coming from the right. Maybe I should intentionally do one with the light coming from the left, but Let's start by making this whole thing a level darker. And then I've still got a bit of tone. In here. Nah, I don't like that. Yeah, I think instead, well, this could go a lot of ways with the lighting. The question is, do I want to have it my original conceit was to have well, no, the original conceit was to have the figure mostly in silhouette with just light breaking across the body. So I suppose I can still have the background around her, have that be a bit darker. So she's still lighter. Well, no, not necessarily, because now going into this background area, I've got the option of deciding: do I want the background to go to black and have her be the lighter area on the surface, or do I want to simply keep the lighting consistent but just go into darker key? So instead of having her be silhouette against the black, have her slightly sticking out of the black. Let's see. Yuel's in the chat. Hey, thanks for dropping by. And Cassiel, hey, how you going? Yuel says it's moving to more epic from portfolio shots you would see in a magazine. Yeah, I think I am going for sort of a definitely. I think when I think epic, I think sort of a broader scale, and it's not necessarily just about the figure, but it's about the environment that they're in as well. These definitely feel like they are a bit more intimate in terms of their scale. Yeah, I don't think that that's I don't think that would be a mischaracterization at all to kind of look at the idea of it thinking more like fashion imagery. Let's see here. Will says the last one has a more royal and powerful theme. I think he meant to say there. Damn, autocorrect. Yeah, you know what's funny? I think that the more imperial feel. I think part of it's the pose, but then part of it also, I believe, is just coming from the fact that I've got all these columns circling around the figure. And now the real question is, do I want to have a giant serpent running through the background? And I think that that might not necessarily be a bad idea. Maybe to have the serpent's head going off panel, but it's just far enough on panel that you can see one of its eyes. And again, it'd be really easy for me to get in here and start drawing a lot of detail, I don't want to zoom in specifically for that reason. I'll get caught up and start drawing detail when this is, it's still thumbnail stage. I don't want to lock it down too soon. But yeah, maybe the idea of just having a giant serpent that's running through the background of this whole piece. In fact, we have it. Erase this out. Whoops, not erase. Let me smudge this out a little. You all says I'm excited to see the serpent. I am happy to hear that. I think what I will do is have it running through the background like this, and then have it come not quite into the foreground, but it will cross back into the composition from this side. So it's going behind the column, and then you've got this large shape running from foreground to background and back again. I might want to come in here and erase out some of this behind the serpent, erase out this part of the column. Yes, don't, and again, I need to make it a point to slow down on putting all this background detail in there, because like I said, I'm not happy with what's going on with the actual serpents coming out of her head. And redrawing those may significantly change how much of the serpent we see in the background. Let's see here. Cassiel says, but to draw perspective, I can draw without vanishing points. I understand this, of course. And when a drawing doesn't need a grid or a vanishing point. Well, two questions, because I also see UL right afterwards asked, do you ever think about doing a comic based around ancient Greek or other divine beings? Yes, that's actually something that's going to be the theme of my next comic book series. I haven't really talked about it yet because I'm still writing and rewriting some of the ideas. But yeah, Greek mythology will play very heavily into the next comic book that I'm going to do. So stay tuned. I'm not really going to announce what it is until maybe the end of the year. Once I get some of the more story points worked out, figure out what my how many volumes it's actually going to be. I'm still playing with the idea of doing it maybe as a kind of a 48-page novella. And instead of committing, like I did with Morningstar, to doing one very, very long series, to maybe just draw it as two 24-page issues that stand alone. Together, I can collect it as a 48-page book that if people want to go and buy that, read it on their own, they can. And if there's a strong response to it, have an outline for 2 more sequels. So in the end being a trilogy of novellas. And I'm just trying to switch it up so that as much as I loved doing Morningstar, working on a graphic novel or a series that takes 10 years to tell the whole story, I think it makes more sense to maybe do smaller segments, do a one-shot with planned sequels, and then just see how it does. And if there's demand to do more, do the rest. If there's not, move on to another story. So yeah, I'm gonna play around with that. On the question of vanishing points, I do believe that you can, yeah, you can definitely draw an image without necessarily having vanishing points. Um, it depends on really style, how realistically you're trying to render it. The closer you adhere to realism, the more you should actually put in vanishing points. If you're doing something like, I don't know if you've ever seen the TV show Aeon Flux, its own MTV series, but it animation in general does have good perspective, and they have perspective in their backgrounds and their environments on that show as well. But the figures are very distorted, and if you wanted to, you could in fact make a very surrealistic environment. I see Amar's in the chat too. Hey, good to see you, man. Thanks for popping in. Cassiel says, understanding framing, camera angles can help. Yes, it can. In fact, I haven't touched perspective at all in the art book study group that we do on Patreon, but I have 2 books by Marco. Let me see, what's his name? Marcos Matthew Mestre. There's Framed Perspective, Volume 1 and Volume 2. Now, mind you, I have not read these books yet, but his first book, Framed Ink, which covers a little bit of the basics of perspective in terms of visual storytelling, was such a great book that I thought, you know, this is worth buying just for the visual story, for the art alone. He's a great artist. But in the book, he really does help explain how perspective works, both in terms of your environment you're drawing, your characters, the angles you're drawing them at, the camera. I definitely recommend looking at these books for a little bit of help. Perspective really is something that it's hard to give a quick answer to because it's a complicated subject. It's not something that you just throw out there. But in terms of perspective, it depends on the story you're telling. Like, for instance, let's say that you're just doing make this a little bit darker. There's an old black and white movie, and you can probably find it for free on YouTube because it's a silent movie. It's very old. I'm pretty sure it's in the public domain. The movie is called The Cabinet of Dr. Caligari, and it's an early horror film about. I think the idea is that there's a guy who can kind of haunt people's dreams, kind of a sleepwalking thing. Kind of like if Sandman was a horror story. Now, as you can see here, I'm just sketching in what looks like it could be an environment, like a landscape. But let's say that this is actually, instead of all of these organic shapes I'm putting in there, let's say that they are not rocks. Let's say that they're buildings. Let's say that this is a highly distorted environment. If you've got the basic understandings of perspective, you can completely make a distorted building and sell it. The fact that I've got this frame up here, the top of this building curving, yeah, you can kind of see that that's an impressionistic fisheye lens thing. Or you could just say, no, we live in a world where everything is curvy and weird. Maybe even the windows. I intentionally distort the windows. Now, this is getting pretty far off from Vanishing Points. But the idea here, the reason why I'm drawing this is I want you to understand the idea that perspective is a matter of perspective. If you are drawing an environment, look, this road is very crooked. I can even have, let's say, a city bus driving through here and have the bus rise up and then come down. Like, the bus is crooked. I'm drawing a crooked ass bus. This all works if it looks intentional. If it looks like you are trying to do a surrealistic environment, then people will believe that that's all correct. I'm just drawing buildings now in the background, just crooked silhouettes. A building that's twisting and arcing as it's making its way around. If it looks like it is intentional, people will buy it. People will be like, all right, yeah, that's fine. That's just the world that this story takes place in. If you want to do something that is more realistic, then yes, you need horizon lines, you need vanishing points. So I don't know if that helps in terms of, I don't know if that answers your general question. Let's see, Amar says, just came back from grocery shopping, chose to walk 2 miles and bring it back in his cart. Yeah, that sounds like a little bit of extra. You know what? It's good getting some exercise going grocery shopping. So he's getting in some exercise, hauling them all home. 4 miles, you said. That's a hike, man. You know what? I'm glad you're getting exercise and staying fit. I actually have a minor pulled muscle, so I've been cutting back on my exercise and just resting on my butt the past few days. But I'm missing getting back to my regular workout routine. On the topic of perspective, UL says, yeah, once you have a real understanding of the rules, you can bend them and know how to bend them to how you want to tell stories. He also mentions I kind of learned it from watching Kim Jong-il. So Cassiel says, yeah, Kim Jong-il, go draw perspective by freehand. Or Kim Jong-il draws perspective by freehand. So, like I said, you're asking, when does a drawing need a grid and a vanishing point? A drawing needs a grid and a vanishing point when you want realistic perspective, period. If you want it to be realistic, even the style of rendering. So it's not about, are you drawing cartoony characters? Are you drawing expressionistic characters? It is what the actual environment that the story is taking place in. Is that based on realistic perspective? If it is, then you always need a grid and a vanishing point. Well, obviously, you always need a vanishing point. You don't necessarily need a grid because, try to opacity up a little bit, this brush size down. Straight line there. So let's say that you've got a picture plane and you're basing it on a realistic horizon. All you really need is to decide, are you looking up are you looking from a low angle or a high angle? If you're looking from a high angle looking down, then you're going to put your horizon closer to the top of the image. If you're looking dead center, you put in the center. But generally speaking, you kind of want to choose one or the other. You lower a high angle. You can use a middle angle. But if you use a high angle, once you've got this as your horizon line, you just need to decide where you want your vanishing point. Now, a lot of people, you can jump right into 2-point perspective. Hang on, let me undo this. Just because I want a little bit more space to draw that line out more. You can jump right into 2-point perspective, but I find that 1-point perspective is pretty sufficient for a lot of images. So you just decide where your horizon line is. You decide where you want your vanishing point to be. After that, you just build everything off of that vanishing point. It's almost like you don't even need to do a full elaborate grid. You can just put in a couple of guidelines. That line's thicker than I want it to be. It doesn't feel like it's very perspective-y. You don't necessarily need to draw an elaborate grid in. you can just draw enough to get a sense of whatever you're going to put in that building and how you want it to relate to the vanishing point. And then after that, just start drawing what's in your environment and checking that the horizontal lines are parallel to the horizon. Whatever's in here, whether it's the front of a car, a building, whatever you're putting in this world, just check that your horizontal lines are parallel to the horizon. Your vertical lines are parallel to the edge of the picture plane, and your lines on your z-axis that are going back into space point towards your vanishing point. I think that that's all you really. Perspective is much more complicated than that when you get into the fine details. And it gets much more complicated when you add in 2-point perspective or 3-point perspective. But I took a class with an instructor named John Messer, and I believe he has a YouTube channel. I haven't checked, but I'm pretty sure John Messer. Take a look his name up on check in YouTube and see if he has a channel, because I think he does. He definitely is on Instagram, but look him up on Instagram. He has courses. I've taken a course, and I'm not sure if he's doing any online teaching right now, but he may be. Anyway, I've taken a class with him. He's a great teacher, and he encourages you to start with the basics. The idea is that his whole approach is that people are intimidated by perspective, and they look at this big complicated thing because it does get complicated, but you can start with a very simple, just 1-point perspective. And 1-point perspective will get you through at least half of all drawing scenarios. You can make a composition and decide, all right, this might look cooler in 2 perspective, but I'm just going to do it in 1 perspective and keep it simple. That'll take care of like half of the things you're ever going to have to draw. You can probably do in just 1-point perspective. And it's just a matter of putting your vanishing point wherever it is on the horizon, and then making sure that all the points that go into the picture plane point towards that horizon. Real simple. Start with that, and you don't even need to deviate into 2-point and 3-point until you get to the point where that's becoming challenging for you. Yuel also mentions that David Finch has a good video on perspective. And Cassiel asks, figures in perspective. This is, I remember a video with him talking about composition, and I really like how he explored the basics. You also confirming that also. It's something like figures in perspective. So yes, check that out. David Finch has some good tutorials on his video. I've checked that out as well. Here's the thing about putting figures in perspective. You saw how I just drew a couple of boxes here. The way you draw figures in perspective, for me, is simply the same way that I drew boxes here. You would just take a box, and let's say that this is a bus. Let's say that right here, this square that I drew is a bus. You know what? Instead, let's make it a car, a weird boxy car, only because it'll make it easier. Let's say I just decide, all right, maybe it's an SUV, and the roof is the same height as, it's a 6-foot tall SUV. So if you put a 6-foot tall figure standing next to it, then they're going to be the same height. The idea is that you can just take a figure, much like anything else that's in this perspective, and say, all right, I'm just going to make a box, a rectangle that's about 6 feet tall. Now you can just place you can place this box anywhere else in the environment. Let's say you go over here and it's this tall, and you were to go back in perspective. Let me think of an easy way to explain this. If I draw this line all the way out here, so this is still a guy who is 6 feet tall. You just decided that this measurement is 6 feet tall. If you draw lines going back towards the horizon, connect that, all the way along here, this height is always going to be 6 feet tall. 6 feet, 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 all the way down to the horizon. Wherever you put that, that height is 6 feet tall. So what that means is the same way that I drew a line over here, you can go the opposite direction. Let's say I go over here, this other way. This line is still 6 feet tall. Now let's go up. 6 feet equals space 6 feet, up here 6 feet. Now I've made a line up here. This line, this last line I drew, that I'm kind of making super bold and dark, this is also 6 feet tall. And if I do the exact same thing, where I go from that line down to the vanishing point, every line that's following this this perspective shape, that line that I made up there, this is always going to be 6 feet tall, always going down, 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 down. The point is just by drawing one figure and deciding how tall it is, you can make a measurement line across and then back into perspective anywhere in the picture, and you will always be 6 feet tall. Let's say that there's a subway in this image. Let's say you've got people walking down subway steps. You can go down 6 feet, down below the picture plane 6 feet, underground 6 feet. Now down here, okay, 6 feet tall, underground. If I draw, again, let me make this a little bit smaller. Let's change it to red. And now, okay, so you've got this 6 foot tall red line. Now, if you take this, and even though it is underground and outside of the picture plane, and you draw this back to your vanishing point, this underground tunnel within there, you've got a person who's 6 feet tall, 6 feet tall, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6 feet, 6, 6, 6, 6, 6. Ad infinitum, all the way back. So by virtue of this, let's say you had somebody coming out of a manhole underground. You would know that right here, this guy underneath the surface of the street, change this to blue. Let's say Mr. Blue here maybe he's crawling up an access ladder. Maybe there's like a, I don't know, some sort of hole in the ground for construction. Maybe that's it. Maybe there's just a big trench and they're doing construction on the ground. You've got this guy below the surface of the street. This guy is 6 feet tall. He's going to be the same height as this person all the way over here. Same height as this person standing on a balcony back here. Same height as this person, I don't know, getting ready to walk across a bridge over here. All those 6 feet. So that's a really simple lesson in terms of like how to place figures in perspective around an environment. Once you've got the height of a figure, you can move people around. And then let's say you've got somebody with them who's, 7 feet tall. You can just kind of go, all right, well, they're just gonna be a little bso taller. The point is once you have 6 feet as a reference, you can start making people different heights in relationship to that one figure that you place there. It's just a matter of having a scale that you're going to work on and establish. Let's see here. Let me scroll back up. Yeah, it's a good point. Amar mentions that it becomes easier and easier when you mention Kim Jong-gi, that he's been doing that for decades. He said that that's a skill that comes from studying life and a ton of practice. So all things very true. And he, Amar also mentioned same with David Finch. Yeah, I mean, have you tried any of these tactics before, Cassiel, in terms of drawing in perspective? Here's a great question. Do you own any perspective books, any books on the subject? Because again, that's one of the reasons why on Patreon we started the art book study group, is because I have tons, like I even mentioned the framed perspective books. I've got tons of books on art subjects that I've never actually cracked open and studied. A lot of times our first instinct is to go online, go to YouTube, Google answers for things, and you can find answers very quickly that way. But I would definitely, if you don't have any good books on perspective, to pick one up. And I think I've got a link to a couple of perspective books. If you go into the description page, the description of this video, and click on the link tree, one of the things I have on there is an Amazon affiliate store, and it's got some books that I specifically recommend that I own. And I think there's at least one or two perspective books in there too. So definitely go check that out. And what I would say is get a perspective book and draw the diagrams in the perspective book. Copy directly from the perspective book and try them out. Because a lot of the answers that the questions you're asking here, like I can give you this quick diagram. I can show you the example of drawing unrealistic perspective versus drawing a simple 1-point perspective and placing a figure in different anywhere in that picture and have them be the correct size. But me showing you that diagram is not the same as you being able to do it. The only way you're going to be able to do it is if you take the time to sit down with a perspective book, study the diagrams in them, draw the diagrams yourself, and then practice making your own versions. Taking a diagram that they did and say, all right, what happens if I change the size of the buildings? Can I still do this? What happens if I draw this from a different angle? What happens if I do this in 2-point perspective instead of 3-point perspective? So at a certain degree, you're going to have to move beyond. Once I've given you the basic answer to the question you asked, the real answer, like Amar and everyone else said, is going to come with time and with actual studying, experimenting. And Amar also says everything begins with primitive shapes. Again, I mean, I could just parrot all of the things that Amar says. I mean, he's been drawing for ages. He knows all of this stuff, and says you have to be able to put primitives in perspective. Master that, then you can draw in perspective. It says everything you see fits into any primitive shape. That's what I was getting to when I was talking about last thing here. I mean, it's probably not the last thing. We'll see. But when I started with drawing a figure and saying it was just a box, let's say that you have a box in perspective. You've got this box, this rectangle, in perspective. It's just a box, right? And you're not drawing it necessarily in like a crazy ass perspective. You're just drawing it at an angle. Forget about whether the box is going towards a vanishing point or not. Let's just say it's kind of an isometric view, or the vanishing point is far enough away that it's not making this figure, this box, it's not really making the edges converge towards a vanishing point. The vanishing point is just real far away. So really simple, low angle perspective. Now you've got this box. Let's say that you decide, oh, I don't know, let's make this box 6 feet tall. You take that box, it's 6 feet tall. Now you know it's the same height as a 6 foot tall figure. Now you take a 6 foot tall figure and you basically use what you know about proportion. Let's say that the midpoint of the figure is the bottom of the pelvis. So you can kind of say, all right, the pelvis is here, upper body is there, legs are down here. It's just a stick figure. You know what? Actually, hang on. I'm going to draw on the surface of the box. I've got the legs here coming down to the feet. I made those hips too wide. Let's bring the hips in a little bit. And then, let's say this is an 8 heads high figure. So we can say, all right, the head is up there, middle of the torso is in the middle of that. So let's say head, middle of the torso, pelvis. Now, this is me just drawing a diagram on the surface of the box. But if you take that same box, you could draw a figure in perspective now by saying, instead of looking at the surface of the box, to actually draw inside of that box. It's a little more challenging. It's a little bit more advanced. But again, this is what Kim Jong-il does. He literally can just imagine these boxes in his mind, and then he's just drawing. What Kim Jong-il, what he does is, it looks like magic to everyone that watches it. But he has explained, he's been in interviews, and he's just sat and told people, I'm not doing magic. It looks like magic to people, but it's not. And he's told people what his secret is. He's not hiding it from anybody. This box that I'm drawing here, now let's say I do the same thing where I put a pelvis in the middle of that box. Maybe move it a little bit higher up since we're looking up at him. Let's say I draw a simple rib cage, some simple cylinders for legs. His feet resting on the bottom of that box. Arms. I'm going to draw them going out to the side because I made the line of that box a little bit too prominent. It's kind of in the way. Drawing a head in perspective is always going to be hard. I know, I'm missing, I'm sure that you guys are talking a ton in the chat, and I'm missing a lot of that. We'll come back to it. But it's worthwhile for me to take the time to draw this simple diagram. The idea is that, and this is what Amar was talking about in terms of once you can draw forms, primitive forms from any angle, then you can draw in perspective. This figure is made out of primitive forms, but I worked out this weird upshot angle by drawing a simple box and then drawing the figure within that box. And what I was going to say about the secret of Kim Jong-il is, and he has told people this publicly, he's not hiding it from anybody, is simply, he just imagines that box. So the figure that I just drew, he draws that, but he just doesn't draw the box. He can see it in his mind. He can picture that box. He can take that box and turn it, to any angle in his mind and draw. Hang on, that's really sloppy. I got caught up in trying to draw fast because I'm all excitable. Kim Jong-il can draw things at amazing angles, and it looks like magic to people. But all he's doing is he can see this box in his, well, I say all as though it's simple. It's not simple. It is definitely a skill that needs to be developed over time, but it's a skill that is difficult to build, but it's not magic. It's practice and observation and a lot of it. And yes, he has an unnatural gift for being able to do that better than I think a lot of people, because I understand the concept. That doesn't mean that I can do what he can do. But if you just draw the boxes instead of trying to imagine them, then you can erase the boxes afterwards and you can have a ton of figures in perspective. This is how Kim Jong-un does what he does. He sees all of these boxes, and then he just draws the figures without drawing the boxes, but he's imagining where they would be inside of this box. So that's drawing figures in perspective. I hope that that is helpful. We're already a little bit past an hour, so I'm just going to go through the chat and address any last questions in relationship to the chat, and then we'll call it a day. But this went here. You know what? See, that's the thing. This conversation on perspective can easily eat up a lot more than just an hour. So, and Cassiel, here's an interesting thing, and I don't know if I encourage this to you guys enough, but you know, the times that we're talking here in the live stream is not the only time you guys have to ask questions. Leave questions on the live stream if you want, and I'll make a list of them and come back and address them in another live stream. So there's things where you want to go deeper. If you have more questions about perspective, I am not an expert in perspective. I've taken a class. Well, actually, I've taken a couple of classes in perspective, but I have tons of books on perspective that I haven't even sat down and studied with. I have a lot to learn. That said, I'm happy to share what little knowledge I do have with you guys. I mean, there's tons of people, you know, David Finch, Kim Jong-un, there's tons of people on YouTube that are far more knowledgeable than I am. Modern Day James covers it a lot in his channel. I know Scott Robertson definitely covers it in his channel. You'll get all the perspective you need and more. That said, I'm happy to share what little I do know anytime you guys want to ask questions. So on any video, leave me a question. Say, hey, could you please talk about this in a future live stream? And we will cover those things. I will try to work my way through any questions you guys have. Yeah, Amar also mentions, I left off with everything you see fits into any primitive shape. And he says an easy way to see this is to imagine everything you see on a perspective grid. Once you understand that grid, then you've got perspective. Then visualizing those objects in that grid will give you the perspective. Noel also co-signs on that. And he says, yeah, I used to use mental boxes or draw a light box. And then from that, I put a scene together. Yeah, Amar says, anytime you see a wireframe of anything that's an XYZ axis, that is what you that is what once you understand, you will see. So it's like once you see a wireframe, you can't unsee it. He says that's how they were able to create 3D programs because it's all based on reality. He also says, try not to just draw, but to see the world that way. Yeah, that's definitely important in terms of like observing the world, looking around and just seeing, just trying to see things in terms of imagining that way. Rossi's in the chat, says every inch is 1 foot, right? And she says hi to all. So yes, hi, thank you for being there, for popping in. Well, see, that's another thing. When it comes to scale, you know, the idea of 1 inch being equal to 1 foot, that's all up to the creator, the person who's making the image. You can decide what you want that scale to be. Like I don't know how long, how many inches this line I drew over here is, but I just decided that this line equals 6 feet. I could decide that if I were actually just do a guesstimate, just drawing on here, I would guess that this is probably about 1 inch. And I'm going to grab a ruler and see how accurate my guess is. Got a ruler right here. And I am off by about 1/8 of an inch. So 1/8 of an inch longer. That is 1 inch. Not bad for just an eyeball freehand guess. Somebody like Scott Robertson can probably, if he just tells his mind, says, I'm going to draw a 1 inch line, he knows measurements well enough that he can freehand and be probably closer than 1/16 of an inch. Like it would probably be like, oh yeah, that looks almost perfect. But see, that's the crazy thing about somebody like Scott Robertson. He's so experienced and advanced in terms of his skill and his precision that he can draw a line and you would look at it and say, oh, that is exactly 1 inch. and he can tell you, it's off by 2/30 seconds. Like he can draw it. It looks like it's exactly an inch to us viewing it, and he'll know how much it's off by. That's the real kind of skill that somebody who's been doing perspective for years has. Let's see here. Cassiel also mentions, I can draw forms. I need to practice to more complex. I can draw a gesture very well, learning from the labs of the force method. Now I just need to learn about anatomy, Bridgman, and perspective. This is something we've been talking about in the art book study group, and I've mentioned it recently. Anatomy is very important, but I think that learning how to draw the anatomical forms as primitives first makes anatomy way easier to learn. There's a book that I keep mentioning, and I'm going to keep mentioning it because the more I study from it, from Walt Reed's The Figure, the more I study from this book, the more I think that this is probably, go big for a second. This, to me, is probably the best book on understanding how to draw the human figure in primitive forms, and then use that to build more complex drawings. Like, even as much as I love Andrew Loomis, I think this book's even better at that than Loomis. Loomis's drawings are prettier, but in terms of actually just understanding the concepts of constructing a drawing, I think this book is number one. Shout out to my homegirl Tanya from my old Animation Guild days. I used to be in class with her, and she recommended this book to me. Changed my life. So I would say, before you get too caught up in learning anatomy with a capital A, learning all of the muscles, I would say that learn how to draw the human figure in primitive shapes. And that book that I just recommended does have anatomy in it. But the anatomy it gives you is not, I don't think it's an overwhelming level of anatomy. I think it's just enough to understand the major muscle groups and to draw convincing anatomy on the figure. I don't think it's necessary to learn every muscle in the body to be an illustrator that draws, good figures. Let's see here. Damn. Amar is mentioned on his long walk that had to wear, what does it say? I got lost in the chat. Scrolling back up. I always have to be careful because sometimes I'm scrolling and I swipe the wrong way and I jump out of the live stream. Amar said it walked with 2 masks and a face shield the entire way to and from the store. That's a lot, man. It's got to be hard to breathe. That definitely sounds like a workout. Let's see. Amar mentions, before you work in the force method, mastering anatomy will help a lot. Clustering your mind with different styles, or I guess cluttering your mind with different styles and books on what you see will only create frustration. It can be a little bit of overwhelm in terms of too many books and too many things. Let's see here. There's a lot of good comments here, Amar, but I'm going to skip over some of them only because there's a lot. Let's see. Cassiel mentions, I like realist and surrealist drawings. Amar, in talking about Kim Jong-il, says, it does not look like magic to me. It looks like a skill he learned from studying life. He did that a lot. To a lot of other artists, I don't know how much time you spend talking to other artists, but when I used to do in-person figure drawing classes, and whenever we were talking about Kim Jong-il, to a lot of younger illustrators and artists, it does seem like magic to them, how he can just start at one end of a page and just fill the whole thing and just go from one drawing to the other, but have a full image. And yeah, it doesn't seem like magic to me either. I understand how he does it, but for me, seeing how he does it, it's not necessarily, oh, it's not a trick, it's just studying. For me, it's sort of like a complicated algebra problem. There are people who can do complicated algebra in their head, and there's people who need a calculator to do complicated algebra. The way I equate that to drawing is, for me, I look at what Kim Jong-il does, and while I understand how he does it, I would need a lot of rough sketches, and I would have to lay all of the perspective out and rough in all of the boxes of the figures and then draw those figures in, versus doing it in my head the way that he does. So for me, it just, again, it doesn't seem like magic to me either, but it's also something that I'm like, it's not magic, but I can't do it. At least not out of my head the way that he does it. So let's see here. Oh, Cassiel says, who? I get lost here. We're talking about an artist. His name is Kim Jong. Now, I never know whether it's Kim Jong-gi or Kim Jong-yi or Kim Jong-ji. It, could be pronounced multiple ways. I'm not sure what the correct spelling is. I should know that because he's an amazing artist and I'm a fan of his work. But if you look him up, Google Kim Jong-yi, and there's tons of he has a YouTube channel. I believe it's called Super Annie, as in animator, like A-N-I. I don't think he is actually an animator. I actually don't remember what his background is, but in terms of the work that he did. But look up his YouTube channel, watch his videos. He is a master of drawing figures in perspective. And what he does is he draws very complicated crowd scenes out of his head. And that's where the whole appearing like magic, that's where the conversation comes from, is that he can do it out of his head. And people who aren't necessarily familiar with perspective don't understand how he's doing that, how the whole thing feels like it's in perspective, even though he's not drawing a horizon line and vanishing points. But what he's doing is the box, like I said, the boxes, the horizon line, the vanishing points, he can imagine all those. And he can keep those fixed elements in his mind as he draws all these different elements relating to it. So let's see here. Yeah, Amar says it's almost like a puzzle. And hey, Byron popped into the chat. Sorry it took this long to get to your comment there. The chat's been popping off, and so I'm still kind of catching up here. And in fact, I'm literally I'm going to finish up with everything that's in the chat and address any questions that come up in the end, and then we're going to wrap it. But we'll see how long that takes, because there's a lot of great comments in here. So let's see here. Cassiel says he uses a mannequin to build the structure in the body. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar says most need hours to figure out a puzzle, but the more you understand that puzzle, the easier you can visualize it. And all a mannequin is primitive shapes. And I got to put this out just so that Amar gets his proper due and gets his proper love. Cassiel says, "Man, you are very philosophical. Man's got knowledge. He's got experience. So I got love for him." Let's see. Yeah, Byron says G said himself that he basically spent 12 hours a day each day in college just drawing due to life frustration. So he has a level of practice most won't get. Well, we've had a COVID year, so some people have been stuck inside for a year. Hopefully they can spend some of that time drawing. In terms of the philosophy, Amar says, if you're referring to me, I would say yes, but all artists are, or at least become so at some point. Yeah, making art, there's a certain level of existential philosophy that I think that has to come into it in terms of like us analyzing what we're doing and why. I mean, a lot of those questions come into terms of like, why are we even bothering to do a realistic style versus an expressionistic or surrealistic style? There's a whole lot of philosophy that comes into the why of art. So let's see here. Yeah, Amar says a lot of sweat equity and a lot of study. He says most don't spend 2 hours a day on art or study of art. Cassiel says, yeah, he always thinks in draw. So yeah, let's see here. I'm gonna skip a couple of these comments. But Byron also says, perspective is borderline its own beast, far beyond even anatomy, in my opinion. It depends on how much you like math. If people are good at mathematical concepts, they tend to be pretty good with perspective. Like I got an A in geometry in high school. So perspective really fit me pretty well. But that said, I haven't taken a deep dive in it, which that's what I've got. Books like the Frame Perspective books. I've got some books that were recommended by John Messer as well. There's one by Ernest Norling. That's a great book on perspective. I think it's just perspective made easy. Some more comments here. That's a good point. Amar says, if you can draw anatomy very well, as well with an understanding of architecture, then perspective will just come. That is a good point. So Cassiel, you made a comment here, and I'm not sure if I understand what you're asking or saying. But it doesn't disturb the school or something, just getting obsessed in something. I'm not sure what the question is there. Let's see here. I think obsession is, Kim Jong-il will definitely use that. I think that most artists do have a certain level of obsession. And I don't know if that's the healthiest term for it because, I think a well-rounded, thorough study is what's required. For anything, you can't just expect to pick it up by just flipping through a book one time. Even with Bridgman, I used to draw constructive anatomy and the human machine like twice a year. I would take out one of the books and just draw the entire book cover to cover. Like I'm sure you guys have heard that story of Frank Frazetta like copying the whole book in one night. I definitely didn't take that long, but I did sit down with it over the course of a number of days. Like I would probably spend a couple of weeks, and I would just spend an hour a day just copying the book, the drawings in the book, and not copying them. I've mentioned this a million times, not copying them to create an accurate duplication. It wasn't a master study in that sense. I was copying it to try and understand the visual concepts that are communicated in that book. And that for me is how you study any book. Let's see here. Castiel says, I think this is directed at Amar. You understand a lot of how the mind works or something else. Yeah, I think he does, very much so. And I think that you do need to understanding your own mind and how the mind processes information will help you learn anything. And that's, I think, the advantage that Amar has in terms of he's learned a lot over the course of his career and his life. And having to learn a lot teaches you to understand how the mind works, or at least how your own mind is. In terms of that thing I mentioned earlier about a 6-foot scale, or like about 1 inch, whether 1 inch equals a foot or whether it equals, whatever it is, Byron says, yeah, the scale's arbitrary. All that matters is it's consistent. Yeah, that was definitely the point I was getting at. Amar mentions, training your eye as an artist is the strongest skill you should master, like training your ear and your breathing as a singer. Cassiel says, can you flip the book? And I think he's referring to the Walt Reed book here. So let me, yeah, let me just do that. Leave the drawing up while I'm over here. So I don't know if you meant flip through the book, but so the back of the book is just all text. you can't really see much of the book the way I have it set up here, because it's if I have my overhead camera set up like I do when I'm doing the study groups, then I think you get a better sense of what's in here. But this book, I think, is a really good example, or this page is a real. You know, I'm gonna have to get rid of my drawings so you can see his drawings. Yeah, this is not really set up well, but if you can see this, a lot of the first half of the book, the first 50 pages, are explaining how to do what you see here in terms of drawing very simple, primitive shapes and simple figures, and then how to pose them in different angles based on that. So, yeah, but I have to have my overhead camera to properly flip through the book. But the book is the first 50 pages is all stuff like that. And that's what you should be worrying about before you even dig into anatomy. It's just getting down those basic volumes. Let's see here. Yeah, Amar mentions 3D really helped me understand that concept. Depth perception is something that's difficult for a lot of people to understand. Cassiel says, which can I paint? Oil or acrylic? Watercolor or chalk pastels? Which can't you paint? Paint whichever you... Byron says, whichever you like the most. And Cassiel says, okay, I like them all. Okay, well then paint them all. Paint one of each every day. Or choose by the day of the week. Say, on Monday I'm going to do acrylics. Tuesday I'm going to do oils. Wednesday I'll do watercolors. Thursday I'll do chalk pastels. You don't have to choose. You can literally, okay, there's two modes of thought. The mode that I tend to work in is pick a medium and get real good at it. So I personally do choose to pick one, and I will pick by whichever one I enjoy working in the most. You can do that, or you can say, I like them all equally. I don't want to choose. That's a completely valid choice. No one's telling you you have to. I find it easier to learn faster if I'm consistent with one medium, but if you enjoy working with them all, then come up with an arbitrary system. It doesn't matter. You can literally roll the dice. You can assign a number to each one and then just roll a dice each day and see which one you're going to work in. Or you can wake up each day and say, what am I in the mood to work on today? It doesn't matter. It is your choice. And if you can't choose, let me put it this way, if you can't choose on your own which one to do, then it's not up to someone else to tell you what you should do. You have to figure out how to make that choice. That's not a choice that anyone should be making for you. You just decide which one you like. Or you decide not to decide and figure out how it is you want to divvy them up. And I think in terms of talking about, when we were talking about the complex thing and needing, when I was talking about how I need grids and boxes to work it out, I think that's what Amar was mentioning here, in that I know how to do it to understand it. But my issue is my mental catalog is not as extensive as his. That's very, and he says, but if I spent 2 to 3 years doing that full time, I would be able to do that, he says. And the mental catalog, Kim Jong-il has mentioned that he observes. He spent so much of his life just sitting and looking. And then he'll look and he'll draw. But sometimes he'll look and just take the world in. And he's like making a mental map of the world, almost like a 3D scanner. That's literally like Kim Jong-il, if he has a superpower, it's that his eyes are like a 3D scanner. He can just look at things and he can scan it and then understand how to draw it from different angles. It sounds to me, Cassiel, like you haven't spent enough time doing observation and observational drawing. In terms of different medium, Cassiel says which can have realistic results. And hang on, the chat just jumped. And Byron said all of them. He said, although most realism artists usually start with oil, but that's a matter of skill, not material. And Amar also says, everything is doable. It just requires time and belief in yourself and dedicated practice. I don't see anything anyone does as special. It is special to them, but it's something that we can all learn. Yeah, I really don't need to say anything. I can just read Byron and Amar's comments. These guys know what they're talking about. Yeah, it's just, yeah, that's the exact answer that I would give. So let's see here. Cassiel says that oil is very interesting. Byron says that I think artists tend to have a personality type that lends itself to obsession, but that's more correlation than causation. Yeah, it's very true. Well, here's the thing. You can look at artists. I think that artists do tend to have that trait, but professional musicians tend to have that trait. Engineers and programmers tend to have that trait. Politicians. I think that it's more about obsession is a trait, and it's one that artists share, but there's a lot of different fields that have or require a lot of obsession. Yeah, Cassiel says, I'm obsessed with drawing. Drawing to me is a thing I love and like to work and escape reality. Let's see here. We can skip the conversation of math. Cassiel says, wait, I see these mannequins in Alfonso Dunn. I've watched some of Alfonso Dunn's videos, and most of the ones I've seen I've looked at are about his rendering and hatching. But I am certain he's gotten into drawing with mannequins. I'm curious, Cassiel, one, have you taken any art classes before? Two, have you taken any life drawing classes where you're actually in front of a live model? And three, do you own any instructional art books? Because the concepts of mannequins are something that most art education, if you're self-taught and you're learning mostly from the internet or from tutorials you read online, there's nothing wrong with that. There's no reason to go into debt and paying thousands and thousands of dollars to go to art school. So much great content is out there, either for free online or really affordable online classes, and tons of great books. But I'm curious how much of your time has been drawing and just enjoying drawing versus how much time has been spent actually studying a topic. I mentioned that because you bringing up seeing mannequins in Alfonso Dunn. And the idea of mannequins, I have a whole bookcase full of art books right behind me. And all of the ones that are about figure drawing, there's some mentions of mannequins. Mannequins are a very, very common practice for anyone who is drawing out of their imagination. The artists who don't use mannequins are sight size artists. If you are simply drawing where you look at what's in front of you, you measure how tall that thing is, and then you go to your canvas and say, it's that tall in real life, I'm gonna make it this tall on my canvas. That's sight size. You simply are just taking what's in front of you and duplicating it on a canvas or a piece of paper. But for artists who draw anything out of their imagination, mannequins are like the first thing you learn. So you're going to see that over and over again. It's not a novel concept. Artists have been using that concept of drawing mannequin structures on the paper since the old masters. It's a very, very common concept. Let's see here. Amar says, I appreciate one who masters one, but I love to be like water. Very, very great. Anytime we can work in a little Bruce Lee in there and just flow. Let's see here. That's a good point. He says, I will change my material based on the current and crashing and burning, succeeding and failing along the way. If I could choose one, I would pick one. This is mastery seems to be appreciated by peers and fans more. But variety is how my mind tends to work. So yeah. I mean, I think variety. That said, I mean, I draw digitally, but I still miss working I tend to work more in black and white than in color, but I like digital. I like working in pen and ink. I like working in acrylic. I do use watercolor. I definitely have not mastered that. I'd say most of the painting I've done is in watercolor. I've really never dabbled in oils, but that's because I'm impatient and oils take time to dry. Let's see here. Yeah, that's a good point. Amar says, all artists are self-taught because academically, what does that say here? Academically, artists can only learn techniques and tools from schools. Most artists already have skills before they even get to school. That's a good point. All right, wow. Okay, we have gotten caught up in the chat. All right, I think that we covered a lot here. Cassiel, anytime that you want to leave comments, like if you want to leave a really, really long comment with a bunch of questions, feel free. I'll answer them in that comment thread, and I can talk about them in the next live stream as well. Maybe if there's a particular comment that you want something to be demoed or demonstrated for you or explained, something that's a complicated, a question that requires a little bit more of an in-depth, feel free. Oh man, gotta love Byron. He's like 30 plus minutes of comment reading, less. Well, you know what I mean? You guys are the reason why I'm here. Otherwise, I'm just drawing by myself. So if you guys have interesting, you guys always have great and interesting comments. So it's worthwhile to sit and talk and share with you guys. So it's always good times. And thank you, Amar. He says, taking the time out for us. I know it takes away from the goal of your stream. Well, you know what? I mean, I'm eventually going to get through everything. True, I did not get as far with the actual Medusa drawings. This is the reason why each project seems to be going a little bit slow and a little bit slow at a time. But you guys are worth it. That's the reason why I'm here. And I need to be spending more time drawing outside of the live stream. I've got some other stuff that I've been juggling that's non-art related, and that's been eating up time. Otherwise, in theory, I would come back. My idea was to come back each week and be like, all right, I've already finished all the thumbnails. Now I'm going to work on finishing this illustration. Finish that illustration during the week, come back the next week and say, I'm working on the next illustration, and be cranking out a bunch of finished pieces. It hasn't been working out that way. That's on me. I've been managing my personal productivity time as well as I should. But also things are hectic. I don't think that's going to improve in the next few weeks. But hopefully in the coming months, I will get a little bit more productive so that even if I spend the entire live stream just talking with you guys, I'll still be showing you new work and producing more work. So hopefully the latter half quarter Q3 and Q4 will be a little bit more. We're already in Q3, but hopefully the fourth quarter of the year will be a little bit more productive in terms of cranking stuff out. So guys, again, thank you. I appreciate all the great comments and the hanging out. Let's go through the normal wrap up here. Again, Patreon subscribers, we have Art Book Study Group. We did it last weekend, so it's every 2 weeks. So next week is going to be the next one. But that said, if you sign up, patreon.com/Jeremy, patreon.com/GERIMI. I have no idea. I'm going to have to check to let you guys know how many Patreon exclusive live streams there are up there. But there's a ton. There's a ton of them. Probably at this point, like something, maybe like 100 hours worth of live stream at this point, because maybe that's exaggerating. Something more than 50, somewhere between 50 and 100 hours of Patreon exclusive live streams, specifically studying through art books. And that's on top of being able to read all my comic books for free on there. And all of the posts throughout the week, work in progress posts that you guys get to see before anybody else, all of that patreon.com/GERIMI. For as little as $2 a month, you can get access to all of that. So head on over and sign up. Newsletter.jeremy.net. I send that out once a month. You get a free digital sketchbook for signing up. You get to see work in progress animated GIFs, blog posts, recommended reads, all of that, newsletter.jeremy.net, and physical copies of my comics, amazon.jeremy.net. My first graphic novel, Eye of the Gods, psychological thriller about a man cursed with visions he cannot control, and both artist and writer. Morning Star, Lucifer's Fall from Heaven, told as a Western. Volume 1 has the first 4 issues in it, out of an 8-issue series. And the final issue of Morning Star issue 8, 24-page black and white comic. That's available from jeremy.net. It's also available digitally on Comixology if you're living around the world and reading digitally is much easier for you. Or if you just ain't got room for any more books. If you're like me and you've got bookcases bulging out in every room and you're like, you know, I'll tell you, honestly, I read a lot more digital now than I used to. And it's not because I've turned my back on print comics. It's because I don't have any more room and I'm not going to get rid of any of the books I have now. So I've been forced to start reading digital. So I'm not pro-digital, but I'm letting you guys know that that stuff's out there. If for whatever reason it's easier for you to get it that way than to get the physical copies. But it should be available in whatever format you enjoy and want to consume it. All right, guys. Thanks so much. Yeah, Amar's right there with us. He says, let's end the year strong. All right, guys, that's it for now. Thanks so much. Go be creative.